Dear viewers, welcome to Deep Sight. Picking up where we left off in our previous episode, let us take you on a journey to explore the fundamental causes behind the formation of the Indo-European language family. Within the Indo-European map, there are also several isolated and unique members. Albanian is an independent branch of Indo-European, with no other language sharing its branch. It may be a descendant of ancient Illyrian or Thracian, overlaid by centuries of Roman rule, Slavic migrations, and Ottoman conquest. Its sound system is highly distinctive. PIE-voiced aspirates became voiced stops, voiceless stops became voiceless aspirates, and the vowel system was greatly simplified. It contains large numbers of loanwords from Latin, Slavic, Turkish, and Greek, and its phonetic features reflect the profound influence of the Balkan Sprachbund. Armenia is likewise an independent Indo-European branch. Old Armenian literature begins in the 5th century, with its own unique alphabet created by Mesrop Mashdots in 405 CE. Armenian underwent extremely drastic phonetic changes. The PIE stop system was completely reorganized into a unique three-way opposition. The vowel system was simplified, and large numbers of Iranian loanwords reflect Parthian and Sasanian cultural influence. These dramatic changes are closely tied to Armenia's position at the Eurasian crossroads and its long history of foreign domination. Beyond these living languages, there are several extinct branches that provide the oldest evidence for Indo-European studies. The Anatolian branch is the oldest attested branch of Indo-European, active in Anatolia, modern Turkey, from the 20th to the 12th century BCE. Hittite, circa 1650 to 1200 BCE, is the earliest known Indo-European literature written in cuneiform. Its most distinctive phonetic feature is the preservation of the PIE laryngeals, H, H2, H3, which had disappeared in all other branches. The discovery of Hittite proved the correctness of the laryngeal theory. Luwian, Palaic, Lycian, Lydian, and others also belong to this branch. The Anatolian branch revolutionized Indo-European studies, providing the oldest and most direct evidence for Proto-Indo-European. Tocharian is one of the easternmost branches of Indo-European, spoken in the Darim Basin of Xinjiang, China. Texts from the 6th to 9th centuries CE show two dialects. Tocharian A, used for religion and literature, mainly from Karasar and Turfan, and Tocharian B, used for daily life, mainly from Kutcha. Tocharian is phonetically highly conservative, preserving the PIE vowel system and the three-way stop contrast, and it shares several striking similarities with the geographically westernmost Celtic and Italic branches. This east-west echo remains a major puzzle in Indo-European studies. The discovery of Tocharian proved that Indo-European-speaking peoples once penetrated deep into Central Asia. Tocharian murals and mummies, such as the famous Lulan Beauty, show the meeting of Europoid physical types with East Asian civilizations. In addition, there are the extinct Thraco-Dacian, Illyrian, Phrygian, Venetic, and other branches, preserved only in place names, personal names, and a few inscriptions, adding layer upon layer of mystery to Indo-European research. Faced with this intricate linguistic landscape, a fundamental question naturally arises. Where is the common origin of these languages? Who were the Proto-Indo-Europeans who spoke that language? Where did they live? This question has been at the core of a century of research in archaeology, linguistics, and genetics. The search for the Proto-Indo-Europeans is, in essence, a deep inquiry into the relationship between language change and historical process. The most widely accepted hypothesis is the Kurgan hypothesis, proposed by the Lithuanian-American archaeologist Maria Gimbutas in the 1950s. The core insight of this theory is that the driving force behind language expansion was socioeconomic change. Gimbutas argued that the Proto-Indo-European homeland was the northern Black Sea, Caspian steppe, present-day southern Ukraine and southern Russia, dating to approximately 4500 to 2500 BC. The culture there was the Kurgan culture. Kurgan means burial mound in Russian, referring to the characteristic mound burials, specifically corresponding to the Sredny Stog and Yamnaya cultures, among others. The expansion of the Kurgan people was driven by horse domestication, the invention of the wheeled vehicle, and a pastoral economy. These technologies gave them unprecedented mobility and military advantage. They expanded westward, eastward, and southward in multiple waves, carrying Indo-European languages to the vast reaches of Europe and Asia. Gimbutas proposed a three-wave expansion model. First wave, circa 4500 to 4300 BCE, west into the Danube Valley. Second wave, circa 3500 BCE, covering Central and Northern Europe, associated with the corded ware culture, which brought Indo-European into Central Europe, giving rise to the ancestors of Celtic, Germanic, Italic, Baltic, and Slavic. Third wave, circa 3000 to 2500 BCE, east and south, onto the Iranian plateau and into the Indian subcontinent, associated with the spread of Indo-Iranian. An alternative hypothesis is the Anatolian hypothesis, proposed by British archaeologist Colin Renfrew in 1987. He suggested that Indo-European spread with the Neolithic agricultural revolution from Anatolia, accompanying the migration of farming populations, beginning around 7000 BCE. The core evidence for this hypothesis is the presence of shared agricultural vocabulary across Indo-European branches, implying that agriculture was part of the Proto-Indo-European economy. Comparing the two theories, the Kurgan hypothesis has a more plausible time depth in relation to the earliest attested Indo-European texts, Hittite, circa 1650 BCE, and it has gained support from most linguists and historical linguists. Furthermore, ancient DNA research since the 21st century has provided powerful genetic evidence for the Kurgan hypothesis. Large-scale ancient DNA studies since 2015 have revealed key facts. The Yamnaya people, circa 3300 to 2600 BCE, possessed approximately 50% Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestry and 50% Eastern hunter-gatherer ancestry. The corded ware people of Central Europe, circa 2800 to 2300 BCE, derived about 75% of their genetic makeup from the Yamnaya, indicating a large-scale population replacement. Bronze Age populations in the Indo-Iranian region also show steppe genetic input. These findings are highly consistent with the Kurgan hypothesis. The current academic consensus is that Proto-Indo-European expanded outward from the Black Sea, Caspian steppe between 400 and 300 BCE, in close association with horse domestication, the wheeled vehicle, and the rise of a pastoral economy. The divergence of Proto-Indo-European was not uniform or gradual. It resonated tightly with historical events. Every large-scale migration, every new technology, every conquest war left its mark on the fabric of language. The invention of the wheeled vehicle gave rise to a shared word for wheel, close, whose phonetic forms in different branches, Sanskrit kakra, Greek kiklos, English wheel, faithfully record thousands of years of subsequent sound change. Horse domestication gave the steppe people mobility and also provided the historical background for the unique Germanic word for horse, the was. Long-distance Bronze Age trade connected different dialect groups and promoted the spread of phonetic features. The Iron Age migrations reshaped the linguistic map of Europe, and the Germanic consonant shift, Grimm's Law, was completed precisely during this period. The expansion and collapse of the Roman Empire brought Latin to Western Europe, and after the empire's fall, it led to the formation of the Romance languages. The phonetic differences among the local dialects record the depth of Roman rule and the intensity of Germanic invasions. Although no direct texts of Proto-Indo-European survive, scholars have successfully reconstructed its basic features through comparative linguistics. This reconstruction itself is a reverse tracking of historical process. We infer the timing of ancient divergences through sound correspondences, and we infer the living environment of the original population through the distribution of shared vocabulary. The phonology of PIE is characterized by 3 series of stops and the unique laryngeal theory. The decipherment of Hittite in the early 20th century proved the reality of laryngeals in PIE, one of the greatest triumphs of comparative linguistics. The stops are voiceless, P, T, K, voiced, B, D, G, and voiced aspirated, BH, DH, GH. There are 3 laryngeal phonemes, H, H2, H3, which disappeared in Greek, Sanskrit, etc., but were preserved in Hittite. Vowels are primarily E and O, with their lengthened forms. Is relatively rare. Vowel alternation, ablaut, is an important grammatical device, e.g., ped, foot, versus pod, of the foot. The sonorants M, N, L, R, Y, W can function as vowels or consonants. PIE was a highly inflected language, expressing grammatical relations through endings. This complex grammatical system was simplified to varying degrees in the daughter languages, the degree of simplification correlating with the intensity of language contact. Nouns had 3 genders, masculine, feminine, neuter, 3 numbers, singular, dual, plural, and 8 cases, nominative, vocative, accusative, genitive, dative, instrumental, locative, ablative. Verbs had 3 tenses, present, past, future, 3 voices, active, middle, passive, and 4 moods, indicative, subjunctive, optative, imperative, with different grammatical meanings expressed by ablaut. By comparing shared vocabulary across branches, we can glimpse the living environment and cultural features of the Proto-Indo-Europeans. The phonetic forms of these words across different languages constitute our most reliable evidence for tracing historical processes. In nature and environment, PIE speakers knew bear, H2art kos, wolf, WL kos, horse, H-equos, cow, gus, sheep, H2us, snow, snigos, water, were, and their skyfather concept is embodied in the word dyws. The distribution of the word for beech, betugos, is particularly important. The natural eastern limit of the beech tree in 3000 BCE was west of the Dnieper River. The absence of this word in Indo-Iranian suggests either that the split of PIE occurred before the eastward spread of the beech, or that the PIE homeland lay west of the beech distribution, evidence that supports the Kurgan hypothesis and not the Anatolian hypothesis. In technology and economy, the presence of agricultural vocabulary suggests they had begun farming. The universal presence of horse suggests domestication, and the cross-branch presence of wheel technology words, wheel, close, axle, H2X, yoke, yugam, proves that PIE speakers had the wheeled vehicle before their split. The invention of the wheeled vehicle around 3500 BCE provides an important time anchor for the divergence of PIE. In society and family, kinship terms, father, PH2TR, mother, Metu-ter, brother, BRH2-ter, daughter, Dug2TR, son, Sunnis, and social structure terms, king, H3RS, heroman, H2NR, sacred light, look, reveal their social organization and values. In religion, the Skyfather, DYWS-PH2TR, has cognate expressions in Latin, Iupiter, Greek, Zeus Pater, and Sanskrit, Diupita. The dawn goddess, Htsos, appears in Latin, Aurora, Greek, Eos, and Sanskrit, Was. The world tree, the war of the gods, and other mythological motifs have striking parallels across branches. The spread of Indo-European was not a single event of conquest, but a complex process spanning thousands of years. In this process, linguistic evolution and historical process resonated deeply. Every migration left its mark on pronunciation. Every contact spurred new sound changes. Between 4000 and 3000 BCE, the Yamnaya people of the Black Sea Caspian steppe spoke a unified Proto-Indo-European. As populations grew and climate fluctuated, this linguistic community began to diverge. The first to split off was the Anatolian branch, probably entering Asia Minor via the Balkans around 3000 BCE. The rise of the Hittite Empire was the achievement of this southward-moving group. Hittite preserved the laryngeals, indicating that it was still in an early stage of divergence when other branches had already lost them. Between 3000 and 2000 BCE, steppe peoples migrated westward on a large scale into Central and Northern Europe. Archaeologically, this corresponds to the expansion of the corded ware culture. Genetically, the European populations of this period show significant Yamnaya ancestry. This wave of migration brought not only new languages, but also new social structures and technological traditions. The populations of Central and Northern Europe became the ancestors of Celtic, Germanic, Italic, Baltic, and Slavic. The Balkan populations evolved into Greek, Illyrian, and Thracian. During this process, different dialect groups began to undergo their own phonetic innovations. Grimm's Law and Celtic P-Celticization both occurred during this period, becoming fingerprints that distinguished the different branches. After 2000 BCE, Indo-European groups continued to expand east and south. The Andronovo and Santashta cultures moved east and south onto the Iranian plateau and into the Indian subcontinent. Around 1500 BCE, the composition of the Rigveda began, marking the establishment of Indo-Aryan culture in northwestern India. Indo-Iranian underwent a unified set of phonetic changes, devoicing of aspirates, s greater than h, reflecting the existence of a linguistic community during this period. At the same time, another branch of Indo-European moved east into the Darim Basin, becoming the Tocharians. Tocharian is phonetically very conservative, having undergone neither the Indo-Iranian devoicing of aspirates nor the Greek vowel shifts, and it retains many archaic features of PI. In historical times, Indo-European continued to expand through conquest and cultural influence, and every historical event left its imprint on pronunciation. The Roman Empire brought Latin to Western Europe, the Balkans, and North Africa. Latin itself evolved from classical to vulgar Latin, and the gap between spoken and written Latin widened. The Germanic migrations brought Germanic to the ruins of the Western Roman Empire. The contact between Germanic and Romance led to complex phonological borrowing and changes. The Slavic expansion covered most of Eastern Europe. Slavic contact with Turkic and Finno-Ugric languages led to palatalization and vowel system restructuring. The Viking Age brought Old Norse to Britain, Ireland, Iceland, and Normandy. The hundreds of Old Norse loanwords in English, they, sky, give, record the depth of Viking conquest. The Norman conquest brought French to England. The vocabulary and sound system of English were profoundly reshaped, and the great vowel shift occurred precisely in this context. The European colonial era brought Spanish, Portuguese, English, French, Russian, etc. to the Americas, Africa, and Oceania. In these new environments, Indo-European languages underwent new phonetic changes, such as rhoticity in American English and vowel opening in Brazilian Portuguese. The Indo-European language family is not only a tool of communication, but also a carrier of human civilization. From the Rig Veda to the Iliad and Odyssey, from the Aeneid to Beowulf, from the Nibelung Lied to the tale of Igor's campaign, Indo-European literature constitutes half of world literary history. And the phonetic forms of these texts are themselves living fossils of sound change. Shared mythological motifs transcend geography and time. The Skyfather, Zeus, Jupiter, Daiu, share a cognate name, whose phonetic evolution across languages records 3,000 years of sound change. The hero slays dragon motif appears in Greek Heracles, Germanic Siegfried, and Slavic Dobrynya. The names differ phonetically but point to a common mythic source. The world tree, Yggdrasil in Norse mythology, the cosmic tree in Indian mythology, symbolizes the axis connecting heaven and earth. The goddesses of war and fate, Greek Moirai, Roman Fortuna, Germanic Norns, all weave the threads of destiny. The Indo-European root of fate means to speak, suggesting the primitive idea that fate is spoken. The transmission of ideas and institutions also relies on Indo-European languages. Greek philosophy, Roman law, and Christian theology, the core elements that shaped Western civilization, were all expressed and transmitted through Greek and Latin. The Latin word for law, lex, is cognate with to read, legere, revealing the Roman connection between law and reading. Vedic philosophy and Buddhist scriptures are preserved in Sanskrit and Pali. The Sanskrit word karma is cognate with to do, kr, suggesting the simple philosophy that karma is what one does. The European nation-state, democratic rule of law, and scientific rationality are all deeply rooted in the cultural soil of Indo-European languages. Looking back over this language journey of 10,000 years, what do we see? The Indo-European language family is one of the most successful and largest language families in human history. From the west coast of Ireland to the Ganges Delta, from Iceland's volcanoes to Sri Lanka's palm-fringed shores, the languages of the Indo-European family weave an invisible web, connecting the thoughts, emotions, and histories of billions of people. But the glory of Indo-European should not make us forget the preciousness of linguistic diversity. Europe also has Basque, a pre-Indo-European relic, the Finno-Ugric languages, Finnish, Hungarian, Estonian, and Turkic languages. Asia has the Sino-Tibetan, Altaic, Austroasiatic, and other equally great language families. The contact and interaction of these languages with Indo-European have also shaped the history of Eurasia. The discovery of the Indo-European language family tells us that language is one of the deepest of human identities. When we say father, mother, brother, we share the same ancient roots with the Sanskrit poets by the Indus 3,000 years ago, the orators in the Roman Forum 2,000 years ago, and the Viking skalds beneath Iceland's volcanoes 1,000 years ago. The phonetic forms of these words have changed beyond recognition in different languages. English father, German fata, Latin pater, Sanskrit pit. But through the lens of historical linguistics, we can still glimpse the common source behind them. Even more importantly, The history of Indo-European reveals the profound resonance between linguistic evolution and historical process. Every sound change is not isolated, but tightly linked to population migration, technological diffusion, the rise and fall of empires, and the replacement of beliefs. From the neighing of horses on the Black Sea steppes, to the shouts of Roman legions, to the creak of Viking longboats, to the billowing sails of colonial ships, the echoes of every historical event have left an indelible mark on the sounds of Indo-European languages. This is the power of language and the most precious legacy of the Indo-European family. When we trace the trajectories of sound change, we are in fact reading a history of humanity written in sound, a grand, unbroken epic spanning 10,000 years. Thank you for watching, dear viewers. That is all for this episode. See you next time.